Well, it is a special night tonight because one of our own will be presenting to us. I know that two things kind of informed my wish to have Lynn talk with us tonight. One is just observing Lane and Stephen, my kids, when they bought their home 10 years ago, they were at a time in their lives where they had a lot of time and interest in a lot of intensive gardening, and they created an amazing garden around their home in the first few years. But in the last few years, their professional lives have really ramped up, and the amount of time they have for gardening is less. And so they have been slowly kind of trying to figure out how to modify their yard so that it's not quite as demanding of time. So young folks have that as an issue. And then folks like Reed and I, who jumped into this house 7 years ago with a lot of gardening, but are also realizing that, we're not quite as energetic as we were for even 7 years ago. So thinking about how to take what we love in our garden, but then transition it to a little more low maintenance garden, not an all at once sort of redo, but just mindfully, really made me think of Lynn and her work as a landscape designer. And so I asked her if she would give it some thought, and she said she would. And so I'm just absolutely thrilled tonight to have our own Lynn Swanson as our presenter. So thank you, Lynn. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I'm excited to be here and see you all, although I wish I could see you all. So I'm going to try to share my screen now and see if this works. Hello. Yes, everybody seeing that? My slide that says transitioning to a low maintenance garden?
It's working well.
Good, good. Okay. Well, Chris, thank you for the introduction. And she gave us a good entree to this topic. And I appreciated the request. I realized when I was designing, a lot of people wanted a low maintenance garden, but a lot of times I was helping people who weren't gardeners. They just wanted a beautiful garden that didn't require a lot of work. A lot of us just love to get outside, but as Chris said, things change, circumstances change. So what are some reasons that we go to or create a low maintenance garden? And I would say that the overriding factor is time. Time, as she said, some people are busy with their jobs, with their families. As a young family, for some of us, now grandchildren or older parents, family is always an issue. I want a fairly low maintenance yard because I want one of everything, I must tell you. So I don't want anything that is too fussy or takes too much work. But even as we're in a house a long time, our priorities change, our interests change. We may want to pack up and do some traveling and leave that landscape. So have we created something that is difficult to leave? We may want to scale back for that reason. Or at the end of things, some of us need to retreat more fully to downsize and get our home ready to for sale. But sometimes we just get tired too. So what can we do? I thought I would organize this topic around several thoughts, but first of all, when I heard a garden speaker recently on sustainability, she brought up a different aspect of sustainability. I usually think of it as, is my garden sustainable for the earth, for the wild things that visit it? But she said something akin to this that spoke of the sustainability of the gardener. And so this is a great question. Are you able to sustain with time, money, and strength the garden you create? And I thought that really does frame our topic tonight. Do we create something that we can care for? This topic is gonna, I forgot I snuck this in. I just broke my ankle. And so as circumstances change, this was my circumstance. I was saying earlier, I'm glad that we're in a rainy, cold week because I haven't looked out the window mournfully. But if I was in a high maintenance position garden right now, I would be in trouble because I am off my foot. It did give me plenty of time to make my slides though. But as we talk about the topic, how do we organize the information or our thoughts? And I thought we'd go from 3 R's. You've all heard of the 3 R's of recycling: reduce, reuse, the other ones skipped my mind. But let's do that with this topic. We're going to talk about a lot of things that are logical, many of you have thought of, but I'm trying to bring them all in one place. So I'd like to come at this 3 ways. The first is reduce the amount of gardening we do. This is probably the largest portion of this and the most obvious, but I think we can come at it from a couple of different ways. Perhaps we need to look at our work habits. Can we revise any of them? Can we work smarter? And then finally, retreat. What if we just want to step back from the work of it? So we'll start with reduce. And the first attack on that is going to be that we reduce the area of active gardening. I've made us a little pretend landscape here. And we'll say this is our house, and you've put some gardens around the home, a few outlying shrubs and trees. But like all of us, if you live there a long time, you usually expand. So this gardener has come back here and decided, oh, I want a pollinator garden. I'm going to make a long, long perennial border for all my pollinator friends. Add a few shrubs. And then maybe a few years later, discovers the love of vegetable gardening. So in go the raised beds for vegetables, or even cut flowers, maybe add a tree. So the first thought is, as we have expanded out in this yard, could we reduce it? In other words, could we just take the raised beds out and be happy? Could we take the perennial border out and be happy? Do one or the other, or both? I posed this question to myself, and I'm going to show you a view. This is my backyard from an upstairs window. So what you're looking at here is a little deck, a water feature. There's some plantings around that, and then the woods. Jim and I live on a 1 1/3 acre lot. A lot of that is in this backwoods. As the garden grew bigger, Jim went and limbed up all these mature trees and started pulling all of the little junk saplings that came up. And little by little, I gardened my way all the way down into the woods. And there are shrubs and trees and things everywhere. So, is this my back 40? Could I just let this go? I thought, well, that is one thing I could do. I could do it one of 2 ways. I could go in there and say, well, I can't let it all go, but I could create a little 3 to 5 foot border here, plant some shrubs all along the edge, and let the bottom just return to what it was. It was a deciduous woods. What would happen? Some of my plants would thrive just fine. Some would decline, some would go away. But it is possible in this yard to let nature just reassert itself and redefine what I am using as my active gardening space. I could go a little further. I could say, well, this is where it was when I moved into this house. It was at the grass line. Past the grass line, you stepped into woods. I could do that again and let all this just go to native woods. I have places to putter around the water feature. You can't see there's a little playhouse over here. I can garden right around that. So I could reduce the physical area in which I garden. So a lot of us can go out in our yard and say, can I let the back end of my lot go? That is one choice. There's another one though, and that is to reduce the quantity of plants. So let's go back to this pretend picture. And let's look at this in sections. So what I have above this A line were those raised beds and a tree. What if I revise that? You know, vegetable garden takes a lot of work, and so does a cutting garden. What if I took those out, but instead of letting it go fallow, I said, well, let me just put a tree to match this other one. Let me pick out 3 big screening trees that do not take some upkeep. I have kept something attractive to look at, but I have reduced my maintenance by far. What if I said, I cannot give up my vegetables, but you know what? I could let this perennial border go. Well, rather than just pulling up the border, I could go in there and say, well, let's get 3 big screening shrubs here, maybe a little colorful tree. Maybe I'll put in a bench so I could rest after working in my raised beds, a few little colorful shrubs, and the other things that were there. Or what if we did both? Here we are with the raised beds out, the perennial border simplified, and we have the same yard with fewer plants. This is an idea I really settled on and would like to emphasize. I think if we consider the mass of each plant versus the maintenance of the bed, we'll find a way to go lower maintenance. For example, you look at this area. Let's say we're looking at a 4-foot by 4-foot area, 16 square feet. Depending on how closely you pack your plants, you might have 16 or 24 or 32 plants in that little 4 by 4 area, all wanting to be deadheaded or pulled or weeded or fertilized or all of the above. Instead, in that 4 by 4 foot area, we could plant shrubs that will fill that with 1 plant, a gardenia, a loropetalum, a hydrangea, a butterfly bush. There's many that offer something. They might not bloom all summer like your perennial border did, but with a mix, they can give you seasons of interest. When I started gardening, in fact, it was interesting. Our yard was so empty that I started as a gardener with shrubs. I know friends who just love flowers and they started with flowers, but I started with shrubs. And it's not until the last few years that I've gotten really more interested in perennials. So for me, it's kind of backing out to the way I started gardening, is to consider just the value of good shrubs. It might be sad for you to think, oh, you're going to take away all my flowers. So a lot of you have on your property mixed borders. This is the same idea here, mixed beds. So look at each of these beds. These are just pictures I pulled off the internet. But each bed has a combination of shrubbery, even a small tree, with bedding plants or flowers around. So, excuse me, the idea here is in a bed like this, it is anchored by the permanent plant material. You could take this little corner and say you didn't feel like putting out bedding plants one year, or somebody in your family became ill, or you were just tired. You could let this bed go with the shrubs, mulch it nicely, and you could call it done. So in that regard, you could even change from year to year how you treated these spaces. I also think we ought to look at plants themselves. Some plants are simply lower maintenance than others. And I'm sure you could shout out, a lot of you, different choices, but here's just a few I picked. We've had some traffic on our email about Edgeworthia lately. Edgeworthia actually is a very low maintenance plant. You need to give it enough room. It'll need 5 feet. And it likes sort of a semi-shady area. But it's like a Daphne. Its branches are formed in trios, and so it forms very evenly. It will shape itself as it grows. It needs no pruning. The leaves drop in the fall, but they are not, they do crumble up without being a lot of leaf litter. Then over the winter, you get this tree full of these, shrub full of these wonderful buds. And right now they're just ready to burst into bloom, little sweet, white outside, yellow inside, fragrant flowers. And I know someone just sent around an idea on propagating these. So I will tell you, I love these and have 3 in my yard. So if someone's interested in seeing if they can get a little piece, let me know. We'll see if we can do that from some of my plants this spring. Pyrrhus, this is a wonderful specimen-worthy plant that does well in our area. It grows more irregularly, but interestingly, and when it blooms, it has these lovely droops of flowers. And after the flowers fall, the remnant of the flowering stem remains, and I think it stays attractive for a long time. Gardenias, you know, they love our area, and there are more and more on the market. You can find them in everything from a little 2-footer up to a 5 to 6-footer now. So if you put the right plant in the right place, you would not have to maintain it at all. And then over here, even in big shrubs, this is Osmanthus gashiki, and this isn't grown so much for the flower as for the leaf. And it has this wonderful variegated creamy yellow and green leaf that is there all year long. You can trim it if you want a perfect mound, but by itself, it grows to about a 6 by 4 foot shrub that really doesn't need any attention. So go out in your yard. I think all of us can go out and see that we have some things that just need attention and other things that are really wonderful workhorses that don't require a lot from us. And so if we're looking for low maintenance, we need to consider the shrubs or plants themselves. Another thought is, would you like hardscape or yard art? There's so many things you can do in your yard in this regard that can be professionally installed. It can be a do-it-yourself project. It can be permanent. It can be movable. And the thing is, stuff like this does not need to be clipped. It does not need to be mowed or fed or deadheaded or anything. This one might need to be painted occasionally, but that's all. And what I'd like to point out, like, look at this lovely Japanese lantern with a boulder and some ground cover. That fills the space that a shrub could otherwise take. You could plunk that in the middle of a bed as something that brings interest and joy to your yard. No maintenance. These little portable things, here's one in a pot, but there's all kinds of little portable yard art that you can use to fill a hole. That rather than buying a shrub, if you have a hole come about, you could put in, have something that you can move around as needed. So that's another consideration. So that's kind of reducing either the area in which we garden or the types of plants we put in our yards. But the second topic is, can we revise how we work, how we plant? Can we do it smarter? I saw this cartoon on a Facebook page of a garden center. I thought it was hilarious. I hope you've all had a moment to read it there. But I thought, oh gosh, it's also true of me. When I'm terrible at a plant store where I see something I don't have, I think it's beautiful, I want to take it home. And so part of revision for me would be when I'm standing there at the garden center and I look at that new beauty, I say to myself after I love it, do I have the right spot for it? How much care would this plant take? Am I willing to give it the care that it needs? So even as we want lower work gardens, I know we're all still planters, so maybe we can start right at the plant store and make some really good choices for ourselves. Another thing is there's so many products now that help us even as we age. The central picture is our front yard after we added a bedroom for my father who came to live with us at 93. And this was the only picture I could find of it. But here is a raised bed that Jim built for him. My father was an avid vegetable gardener, but now it was getting hard for him to bend over. So Jim built this in our yard so Daddy could plant some things and not have to bend over. You can find these commercially. Here's one that looks kind of similar, but there's also ones that are much more attractive. They can look like troughs on legs that are painted pretty colors. And so you could bring them right up to the edge of a patio and enjoy gardening closer to your home than perhaps your vegetable patch way out. Not only vegetables, but flowers can go into pots. You can get a really tall pot. It's much easier to manage than perhaps on the ground. You can put plants on plant stands. We even put some plants out in the landscape in pots. These pots, in fact, these two have Japanese maples in them. And I will tell you that the bigger the pot, the more self-sufficient the plant can be. These, for example, are fine unless we start to go a week or more without water, and then they get some. So things we can add that help our work. Another question we might ask in our work habits is, am I doing necessary maintenance for the health and beauty of my plant? Is there anything I can give up? Pruning is so good for a tree in its youth and on its way to growing up. I was in Smithfield recently, and I pulled into the parking place, and there was this mature crepe myrtle. It was just a beautiful shape. And as I walked up to it, I could see it had been well cared for in its youth. It had strong, separated trunks. All in here was clean. As I looked more closely, up here I could see, yes, certainly there were some things that could be cleaned up. But this tree had been given such good care on its way up that to let it go would be fine. Now, this was a commercial setting, so it would take commercial tools to get way up here now anyway. At some point, our trees outgrow our ability. So if we give them good care in their youth, at some point, we can let them go. Another thought is what we give them to eat. I will confess that I'm a bit lazy on this myself, but I've also heard people say, if you have a standard shrub and it has grown to maturity, you do not need to feed it anymore. You don't want it to grow particularly anymore. And I say this knowing there are some plants with special needs. If you love roses and things that need high nutrition to bloom well, I know that they do need a regimen. But many shrubs, and many native shrubs in particular, if you take care of the soil, they're perfectly happy. One thing I like to do when I walk around my yard and check on plants, I don't know if you all notice that sometimes the soil recedes from the plant roots and it needs a little recovering. Why not take out a good organic like black cow or some other compost and use that to cover those roots? Those organics will work down into the soil, feed the microbes, take care of the soil, and that is often just what the plant needs. Another thought is when we work. I want to cite my father-in-law in this. He had a beautiful yard. He had lots of plants, trees, and shrubs, and he loved his flower garden. He worked every year to make it beautiful, and it was. But I watched his habit. He worked early in the morning. He went out every morning early, and at 11:30, he stopped. I thought that was a great observation. I knew I was a gardener when I was much younger, when I was willing to work through Raleigh summers and be out there in 90 degrees and not care a whit. But as we age, that bothers us. So why not pay attention to the time of day, to the season? Incorporate that in the type of plants we continue to grow. Make it as pleasant for ourselves as we can through all the seasons of the year. Another thing is work smarter. Maybe you need a new tool. There are tools to buy when you are moving up from hand tools, and there are tools to buy when you're moving down to things that have gotten too heavy or too cumbersome or too noisy. Jim and I are becoming real fans of battery operated tools. They have just gotten better and better and better. And this Christmas was kind of a steal Christmas for us. This is my Christmas present, and I haven't even gotten to use it yet between my hand and my foot, but I saw a woman taking down a bamboo stand with this little tool. It's a handheld, like mini chainsaw. I would never use Jim's chainsaw, but I would use this. So I got one for Christmas, and I'm very excited to try it. Battery-powered hedge trimmers. I used to go out and hedge trim with manual clippers. Boy, is that hard on the shoulders. The first time I used our battery operated one, I thought that is one of my best gardening days. And now to cut down ornamental grass, instead of chewing through the base, I just slice right through it with this. There's easily handled ones like this. You can get big ones for the tops of your shrubs that have gotten very tall. Jim recently got this battery operated chainsaw, and you would think that would be tough. This little guy worked so well. He was very happy with it, and so much easier and cleaner and nicer than the gas powered one. We also got this little blower, and we got it for quick jobs rather than dragging out a heavier one, like when you want to clean the driveway or clean the front walk. This is so light and wonderful that I loved it immediately. And just to show you how easy it is to use over here, I have a picture of our 9-year-old granddaughter in the fall. She was here doing virtual school, and I was trying to get her outside during break. So I said, let's go clean the driveway. It had pine needles all over it. So I got out a rake for her, and I started up the blower, and she took a look at me and said, Mimi, can I try that? And guess who had the rake the rest of the time and who had the blower the rest of the time? And she loved it. And at 9, she could use that to do the whole driveway. This is our personal aging in place tool. Jim had very wisely saved this little metal cart from my father's house, not knowing when or if we'd ever use it. And we, for years, had been thinking, what can we use? Our backwoods are getting steeper all the time. They're not changing, but we are. We thought, should we get a little gator to run around down there? Would not have worked on those paths. Then we thought of some other equipment that would have been overkill. And finally, Jim settled on this 4-wheel drive tractor, no mower deck. We just wanted the tractor. And we can take this down in the back and transport debris. We can move wood chips. We have just loved this. This wheelbarrowing has gotten harder and heavier every year, and this is a lovely replacement. As I said, it does wood chips, and this is a lot of wood chips, and it was a lot of loads with the tractor, but it would have been a lot harder with a wheelbarrow. And besides that, it does all kinds of other things. This is a little fun picture. This room here is our sunroom where we have our Christmas tree. Here's a picture of Jim chopping up our Christmas tree. He tosses it out the window, lands on the deck, the patio, and then there's Jovi, our granddaughter, and loading the Christmas tree branches into the cart to be transported down to the woods. So very helpful tool to us. So as I said, I think we're still planting, and I just wanted to remind all of us to some of the good principles that we should really be following now more than ever. Remember, right plant, right place. Allow room for mature growth. If you fall in love with a plant, look at the tag and believe it's probably going to grow even a little more than they say. If it's a 5-foot plant, don't put it in a 3-foot place. Put it in a 6-foot place. Don't create maintenance for yourself down the road by not giving plants enough room. Another reminder is water-wise gardening. If you buy a thirsty plant, put it near your water source. Drought-tolerant things can go farther out and be fine, but keep that in mind as we plant our new plants. Okay, so the last topic is retreat, lessening the workload. And this is a hard one to come to. I remember my parents, Jim and I, were on them a lot. My dad loved his vegetable garden. We said, why don't you hire out your grass cutting and you'd have more energy? And they'd always say, we'll think about that. But I think these are things that we do need to think about. By getting help with some of our yard tasks, would it allow us to stay in our houses longer, enjoy them more? So what are we talking about? Seasonal things like spreading mulch or pine needles, aerating the lawn, irregular tasks such as trimming or picking up the yard. I don't know if you're like me, but I always think of, oh, I could have hired a neighborhood child when I'm doing this, not before the task is in process. other tasks that you can think of. But ask yourself, what are my least favorite tasks? What could I readily give up? And consider finding help with those when you want to retreat from the workload. Who do we get for help with these? Neighborhoods are a great source. I don't know about you, our neighborhood actually has a listing that includes willing teen workers, and one thing they will do is yard work. So that's a ready resource for us. A lot of you may know a neighborhood child or have a grandchild or a niece or a nephew. This is Jovi doing the driveway, and she asked me for $1 to clean the driveway that day. I gladly gave it to her, and I thought, oh, I can think of some other chores down the road that this girl might be a help with. So there are young people in our lives that might love that. I've even met some young families in our neighborhood who have children who are interested in gardening, and to get a relationship with them and to know they might love to come over and help you deadhead plants and learn about flowers. There's also organizations in the neighborhood, like right now there's a lot of pine straw sales going on. I was reading the flyer that came out with one of these, and I noticed, as usual, you could order pine straw and go pick it up. For a higher price, you could order pine straw and have it delivered. And for a slightly higher price, you could order the pine straw, have it delivered, and have it spread. So there is help out there everywhere we look. And many of you are in neighborhoods which usually have an association either through a Google group or a next door group. And I've watched traffic on these go back and forth, either high school or college students or someone looking for odd jobs or landscape work. And I've even seen homeowners advertise on these groups saying help wanted with, and it could be anything from a light task to a heavy task needing a strong person. So we can make use of these resources, I think, to lighten our load. And then if we have to take one further step, there's always the professionals, someone who will do a full service job. This gentleman is a child of our neighborhood. He's grown up and has his own lawn mowing professional service. It helps to get to know what's available for many reasons on illness. Jim and I now use this fellow. If we're just going to be out of town for 2 weeks, we'll call him up and say, will you mow our lawn once between these dates? And we can arrange that. It's a wonderful resource. So the final and further retreat might be if we have to prepare our house to sell. If we are preparing our house to sell, we usually take great pains with the inside. What about the outside? I called a friend of mine who's a realtor, and she said the advice she gives for many people listing their house is pruning overgrown shrubbery in the front. And her little quote is, you need to see it to sell it. So this is something that if we think a sale is down the road for us, we really need to think ahead. For example, if you were going to sell your house later this year, if you have some front plants that need some major pruning, that should be done now. That cannot be done too close to the sale, or the plants will not recover and they will not look good. So sometimes it takes a little thinking. And then another thought I had on this is, we want to maintain curb appeal when our house is on the market. So look at your yard and how it's landscaped and what you have in your beds. How long could that go untended before it would look untended? And maybe we need to think about that, because we might need to return to some of these other ideas and simplify our beds or hire help. Lots of times when we go to sell, life gets complicated quickly. We need to be in the other location. We need to be making decisions. We need to be making arrangements with family or a job. So know that you may not be at home to be maintaining that landscape as well as you would like to. So again, thinking ahead, what changes could I make way ahead of time to put those things in place that I need? And then Diana said, but don't take out all your flowers, because pops of color are always good when your house is on the market. So you can do that. You can leave some of your flowers. You can put in pots of annuals that bring color to your house. And then if you do move, I think we don't want to be too discouraged. I've known gardeners who dig up a favorite plant or two and take it with them, or many. I know people who sometimes take cuttings and try to propagate that favorite plant so they can replant it. And so one of my jobs was actually with a woman who was downsizing from an acre to a townhome with a courtyard, and I helped her with her courtyard. So I posed this question to myself. I love my yard. I love all my plants. What if suddenly I was transferred to a courtyard? Could I be happy? I said, yes. What are my favorite things? I would take a variegated Daphne odora for winter fragrance. I would take a small red maple for colorful leaves and because we love maples. I would take one of my favorite flowering shrubs, a hydrangea for summer blossoms. I would take a small boulder because I love working with rock and it would be a memory of that, and a few other things to fill in. And I thought, you know, if I stared at that, I think I'd be a happy gardener. So there's been some thoughts here of how can we reduce our yards, either in area we garden or in what we put in our gardens. Can we revise our work habits? Or can we find a way to retreat from some of our workload? But I do want to encourage us, don't stop. Just today was this article in the Wall Street Journal: for better health, just head outdoors. Study after study shows that being outside is good for us physically, mentally, emotionally. So I think that we garden as long as we can, maybe simplify, but keep gardening. Well, that is all I had. This is more of a conversation than a information, so I don't know that there's questions. I'm glad to entertain them if there are, but if anyone has a thought, I thought I would invite you, if you have your favorite tool that you've discovered that has made life easier for you, feel free to shout that out. I think we'd all love recommendations on that, or any other feedback you have.
Folks, you can put questions in the chat room. We had one question about whether you're ready to lend out your battery tools. Maybe you could just have a recommendation as to where to get them.
There are lots of places you can go to the even the big box stores now have battery operated tours. And my first hedge trimmer was a Black & Decker, and it worked really well. We have, as we've worn things out, we've moved on to steel. And I will tell you this, if you stay in the same family of tools, then the same battery often works on multiple tools within that family. So for example, we have now 2 steel batteries going in the garage, and we can grab one of the steel tools and pop on that battery and it will work on any number of them. And Jim, you can unmute and say if you have any other advice on where to purchase these things. But most hardware stores, big box stores all around have these things.
DeWalt has pretty good battery tools that you can get at Home Depot. We got the steel tools that tend to be a little higher end lawn places. They were not cheap, but you know, they are powerful. They've come a long ways with the battery tools.
And they're lighter, and you're not hampered by a cord. You're not pouring gasoline. Highly recommended.
I love the chainsaw, battery powered chainsaw. It's quite powerful, and it's just not noisy. And chainsaws can be such a pain, you know, they can be tough to start sometimes. And this thing, you just turn it on. It's great.
Am I on? The steel is steel is typically sold by, I'll call them independent folks. Like I know in Cary, I think Cary Mower and Saw still carries steel. I know in North Raleigh, I think it's Clay's, but The steel is usually at these, what I call independent kind
Yeah.
of steels.
We got ours at Clay. So,
Thank you for saying that, Sid, and I forgot that because Jim took care of that. In fact, the thing he got me for Christmas, those were flying off. That's a fairly new tool, and it was flying off the shelf, wasn't it, Jim? You had to go down there and.
yeah,
The other key point is not only do the batteries typically work across a family, but what also gets expensive, you only need then one charger for like
yes,
steel
yeah.
batteries or one charger. So if you stick within one family, you'll have just one charger to buy. The only
So
thing
like-
I know, and maybe Jim, you can comment on, I don't know whether some tools require a more powerful battery and other tools only need a less powerful. So I don't know whether that's a concern or not. I haven't really asked.
It is a concern because the hedge trimmers and the chainsaw, it's good to have a powerful motor and a strong battery. The steel battery, again, the charger and the battery are not cheap, but the steel battery will last an hour, which is quite significant. The DeWalt, the tools that we have are the same batteries that I use for power tools like drills and I've got a circular saw and a sawzall and and it's the same batteries. So just be careful when you buy it to make sure the batteries. If you expect to buy it with a battery, we bought a weed trimmer from Home Depot, and I came home and somebody had ripped off the battery in the store. And I took it back and they were very gracious, and I went and got another one and the battery was gone from that one too. DeWalt was not very smart because they had the battery packed at the bottom of the box, and there was somebody sneaking into the store and they were waiting until nobody was around, flip this thing over, rip open the bottom, take the battery out, and then just close it up again. So that's big ticket items. So you can often buy the tool without the battery if you've already got a battery. So anyway, but don't be chintzy on the batteries because again, like chainsaw and hedge trimmers are need a lot of power. Especially hedge trimmers, you'd be surprised. They really can get jammed, and that was I found with we used to have Black & Decker, and it used to it would work okay, but it would just get jammed in the branches. So I found the steel, it pretty much handles it. So.
And I would just chime in, when we switched from gas to electric before we went to the battery some years ago, I mean, just the time, energy, and effort all of you probably remember those reels of 50 feet or 100 feet of electrical cord, unwinding them, winding them. This idea with the battery power tools, we just take it off the wall in the garage, walk out there and, blow off the driveway or trim a hedge or whatever, and then just take it back in. I mean, it's great. You can't beat that convenience.
Yeah. They've come a long ways from battery tools.
First, I just want to thank you, Lynn. I particularly really appreciated the little drawing that you started with and your illustrations, because that just made, literally I was transposing that onto my own yard.
Oh, good.
And could see how I could put something like that into effect. So I really appreciate that. The specificity and clarity of your presentation made a lot of sense. So I really thank you for that. And really appreciate. I did want to take just a moment for those of you to tell you about next month's speaker is going to be Larry Solar. He's going to talk about backyard birding here in Wake County. So he's going to talk about our community and the birds that we experience here. And gosh, Lynn, that's right up your alley as well. I know you'll enjoy. And he's from Wake Audubon, so that will be our speaker next time. So thank you again, Lynn, and thank you, Jim, for your added expertise there at the end, and I'll send it back to Kathleen.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. And wow, Lynn, that was so outstanding tonight. I was able to pull quite a few just little tidbits from your suggestions that I think were very valuable. And having your assistant there to tell more about his tools and such. Thanks, Jim. So I sure appreciate everybody coming to the meeting tonight. And we will see you all next month. So have a lovely time. Remember Jenny, please. So she knows that we haven't forgotten about her. So I'll just wish everybody a good night. We'll see you next time.